Hi, this is Barbara Emodi, and I'm continuing my little dissertations on sewing machine accessory feet that you probably have in your sewing kit and might not be using at all, or you might have tried them and be disappointed in the results. I want to talk to about a few of those to you, and the first one would be the machine blind hem foot. I'm always kind of small to myself when I'm in a sewing machine store and see a dealer try to sell a machine to a woman and say, and you know, it has a special foot, it can do a completely invisible machine hem, you'll never do a hand hem again. And of course that's not true. Blind hem foot, a machine hem done that way, will give you a hem that is strong and should be close to invisible, but of course for many fabrics, particularly flat fabrics like a satin or a fine cotton, something that's really got a hard gabardine, a hard finish, you'd absolutely want to do a hand hem. But the machine hem, blind hem, has got real strengths and attributes. The first of which is it's strong, stronger than a hand hem. My mother has a story of one of her first memories of me as a toddler was thinking she'd lost me, and I was discovered sitting behind the living room curtains with my little tiny hands unpicking her loose hand stitches. I actually unpicked the entire hem, which I think was a sign of things to come and all the stitching I would be unripping in my lifetime. But that's a really good example. If that hem had been done with a machine blind hem, it would have been unobtrusive from the right side, but it would have been strong. Of course, every machine stitch is a lock stitch, so like a little tiny knot. The thread from the top and the thread from the bobbin interlock with every stitch, which is why they're hard to unpick, which is handy if you have a toddler behind your curtains. I also would, in addition to home dec applications or where you've got to do miles of utility hems, I would use it in garments that I know would have some wear, but I didn't really want anything like a straight line of straight stitching, a machine. Sometimes I think those look kind of cheap, pardon me. But I want that strength. So for example, in children's clothes, for sure, the bottom of pants, if I'm making, say, a wide, linen pant, and I'm worried I don't want to have a hem that's going to catch and come out all the time, but I also don't want to just put a line of straight stitching, I would use the blind hem foot for that. So very simple to do, but you need to have a couple of things to think about first. One is a suitable fabric. I like something with a bit of texture or a bit of loft. You get those little, we've seen it in ready to wear, those tiny little vertical stitches. I'm going to show you how to reduce those to near invisibility, but they are there, and it's nice to have a fabric that is going to bury them and hide them. So something with a print or some loft. Sweatshirt fabric is a good example, works very well, or a woven like a linen or a wool that's got textures. I wouldn't put it on something like a satin. I mean, that would be like laying those poor stitches on glass and not appropriate. So the first thing is to think of the suitable fabric, and the second thing to think of is the elements for success, and I'm going to show you those at the machine. One is loosen your upper tension. Give it extra thread so it can do that swing hemming stitch without puckering. The second one is lengthen your stitch length. You don't want those hemming stitches to happen more frequently than you need to. The third thing is you want a width, a suitable width, something to a mid or a large width in zigzag, so you've got enough swing to catch the fold. And the last thing is to use your needle position within that swing of the big zigzag to fine-tune it exactly, so you're just taking a nibble out of the fabric rather than a big bite. So let's get to the machine. Okay, I'm going to show you how to use a blind hem foot. I'm using it, if this was an Olympic diving event, this would be 11 out of 10. I'm using white thread on some flat black fabric, a ponte. Usually I would not use a flat fabric with this foot because it increases my challenge a little bit and it decreases my ability to relax a little bit when I'm doing it. So probably I would use this hemming treatment in something that has a pattern and a bit of texture. This is a terry knit, a French terry knit would be perfect. You'd never see any traces of those vertical fabrics. Or this is a knit. This actually can be hard to hem properly, and it's very nice. You get a nice strong hem that you really can't see in a fabric like this. And another fabric in, say, a woven would be something like this herringbone. So those are the kinds of fabric that I would use to make this kind of a hem. This is the foot, and it looks very much like the edge stitching foot, but it's got a couple of extra things. This actually moves on mine. If you don't have a foot that looks like this, you probably have one that has maybe a little red bar or a little red knob and a kind of a white ledge, but basically it's got a ledge here, and I don't know if you can see it here, but it has either a wire or a little bar there that lifts the thread up. So when you are stitching your hem, the thread is not going to pull too tight and make a pucker in the middle of every stitch. So 4 things you need to do. First, well, the 5th would be to put your foot on. But one of the things that you need to do first is loosen your upper tension. Probably if your normal is about a 4, I would take it down to a 2.5. And that gives a little bit of slackness in the thread, so you're not going to make a little pucker with each stitch. So that's the first thing you need to do. You then need to lengthen your stitch length, because you do not want these little vertical stitches that are going to bite into the hem fold to be more closely spaced than they need to. So I'm putting this down to about a 4, which will give me a very long stitch. You then need to adjust your stitch width, because you're going to do straight stitches, and then a zigzag across. And the size of the zigzag will really have an impact in how big the needle is going to bite into the fabric. And then fourthly, and very important, and I think not often mentioned in a lot of instructions, is your needle position. Your needle position is very fine, and I would use that once I have tested it out first to fine tune it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the fold, and the fold is really important. That's really what this whole thing rests on. Now I am going to I'll use this side because it's a little bit straighter on my sample. I am going to use a blind hem stitch that is a row of straight stitches and then a zigzag. All machines pretty much have those, more contemporary machines. You will find though that in some machines there's one that's a tiny zigzag and then a big zigzag. That is really designed for sewing on a knit fabric, because of course any zigzag stitch is stretchy, and it can be handy also if you're not finishing this edge here. It can kind of function as a finish for your hem edge. So I'm going to just pin this down. Now, I've just pinned up the hem, and what you'll maybe notice here is I haven't put the pins close to the top of the hem, which you would expect, but I've put it close to the fold. That's really important. That's the big trick. So pin your hem up but close to the fold. And then once you have that, you flip the hem back, exposing really a single layer here of the hem allowance. And that bar, which actually shows I think quite well against the black fabric here, is going to be right against the fold. The stitches, in my case, for the stitch that I'm using, I'm going to be running the straight stitches in the hem, single layer of the hem allowance, and that zigzag is going to swing over and just catch barely, hopefully, into the fold. So we'll just do this without any fine tuning and adjustments. Okay, I'll take this out of the machine. I usually test this about 3 times before I commit to a garment. A couple of things I want you to see. First of all, because I have loosened the hem, the upper tension, and because the bar, or it could be a wire in your foot, in the foot has kind of stretched that thread. See how loose that is? That's really key. That zigzag needs to be a loose stitch. That's really important because that will keep it from being a tight little dimple. All right, so we'll turn it to the right side. I'm not super happy with it, but it's very good for educational purposes, so you can see how a stitch like that will look on the right side. But I don't want a vertical stitch that's that big. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it back in the machine, and this is where the needle position comes in. And we're going to see, having moved that needle position over a little bit, take it out of the machine, have a look to see. Okay, those are still a little big, they're smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the needle over one more. Check this again. Okay, and see those stitches are actually fairly discreet. You see here? So I'd probably be happy with that, and I'd continue with my hem and giving myself a fast, a very strong, durable hem done entirely out of machine. Thank you.